All right, welcome everyone to a very special edition of the SERMAPod. This is the podcast for the Sports and Entertainment Risk Management Alliance. I am the founder and CEO of SERMA, Rich Lenkov. I'm also mostly the host, although we're always looking for guest hosts, so please let us know of the SERMAPod. Very special because, as you see, we have not one guest, but three special guests today. And also, as you hopefully see from the background, we're in a hallowed location in the world of sports and entertainment, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, home not only of the Indy 500, but very relevant to this weekend, the Brickyard 400, where we will be watching this weekend. We were there at the practice today. And we are here today because we are discussing a very interesting topic, racing industry risk. We've got three of the foremost leaders to discuss this issue with you. They all happen also to be SERMA members. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to have a really interesting discussion about some of the unique risks, legal insurance challenges to the fast-growing racing industry. Start off with our friend, longtime member, Jimmie.
Thank you, Rich. So glad to have you here today, and so glad to have SERMA here. My name is Jimmie McMillian. I am Senior Corporate Counsel and Chief Diversity Officer for Penske Entertainment, which is comprised of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the NTT IndyCar Series, and IMS Productions.
Yeah, and I'm Jayson DeMarco. I'm the head of the MGA, SVP of Underwriting for Players Health. We do insurance risk management for both amateur sports and fitness. We also have a college and professional line, and just recently got into motorsports, so happy to be here.
Well, thanks again, Jimmie. Rich, George Burgee with Davies, been in the insurance industry 31 years, and we have a whole suite of insurance services, and I'm on the claims side of things for the last 31 years, so glad to be here.
Well, thank you all for joining us. For those of you that have watched our podcast before and listened, you'll know that we're not too scripted. Purposely, we haven't even really discussed the topic too much today or looked at some of our notes. So we're going to sort of go off the cuff and bounce around, get some expertise from, again, three of the foremost leaders in this industry. Jimmie, first of all, we're coming off a wet day today. Today was the practice run for the Brickyard 400, which is a NASCAR race here in Indianapolis on the famed Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We just were looking at some of the cars, but then we had to leave because of some thunder. Tell us some thunder and some rain. Tell us sort of what weather challenges you have to deal with on a daily basis and how you adapt on the fly to something that is by nature, no pun intended, literally changing by the minute.
I call racing the largest outdoor wedding in the world. That's what we do. We literally spend a lot of time planning some fantastic events, hoping our fans are going to come out and have a wonderful time enjoying not only the track, but all the festivities we have around it. But obviously, it's an outdoor event, and we have to be very careful and cautious about having people out in metal grandstands in the event of lightning, rain, thunder, even walking to their cars. It's about a number of cases that are out there, surprisingly number of cases about people who were struck by lightning in the parking lot, struck by lightning in the grandstands. And so it's a part of what we worry about. And you saw today, we have some processes in terms of monitoring the weather, sending out warnings, issuing warnings, trying to get people out of the stands, using our security people to get people out of the stands. Unfortunately, the last two Indy 500s have had rain. One had a 3-hour rain, last year's had a 2 or 3 hour rain delay, but our team has become very astute. You've got to worry about your fan base, but you also have to worry about your on-track activity. We cannot race on the oval in rain. You can do it on a road course. You can do it on a street course. And so when it rains, as you guys saw today, the minute a drop hits the track, we usually pull the cars off the track and everything freezes and goes on hold because of the amount of danger that's involved in running cars on the oval at high speeds in rain.
In addition to rain, we experienced the other element today, which was heat. When we got there this morning, it was probably well into the 90s. George and I were discussing how the cars keep cool. Obviously, that presents a risk to drivers. We'll talk about fans in a moment, but the extreme heat that we're experiencing today presents a real danger to drivers. The inside of those cars must be, literally a sauna. So how do you deal with avoiding injury there?
They're continually creating new engineering products to try to keep the driver cool, try to keep the driver hydrated, things that they have inside of the car to try to keep hydration going. But ultimately, it's hot in those cars. It's hot in those suits. It's hot in the fire suits. It's also hot to our folks going over the wall and our pits. And we're just warning people constantly about the dangers of heat and staying hydrated and continuing to stay warm. The Brickyard is known for being extremely hot during NASCAR weekend. And so it's just a matter of that. They race in Phoenix. I mean, NASCAR races in some pretty steamy, hot spots, and the fans love it, but the drivers, it takes real skill. A lot of people think, hey, you're driving a car, do you have to be in physical shape? Yes, you do. You're, as you point out, Rich, dealing with intense heat, G-forces, and of course, in NASCAR, you're also dealing with the fact that it's natural for you to have impact. So they're hitting each other, the damage to your bones, your injuries, your muscles, all of those things are getting worked in terms of a NASCAR race.
George, I want to get your perspective on the weather issue, but before we do that, give a little more detail about your experience in this field, what you do. We talked about the fact that you're going to be on the road for the next 5 weeks, literally hitting the whole NASCAR circuit. So what is your day-to-day life like when it comes to racing? How'd you get into it? And then we'll talk about your perspective on some of the weather issues.
Yeah, we work with a bunch of different professional sports leagues and the promoters of the racing industry. We reach out, we're working with them closely. I think we work in conjunction with their risk management team, so we're embedded there to report back on incidents that we come across. I think, like you said, Jimmie, getting back to the weather that we experienced today, I think one of the key things is we saw the rain, but even before the rain, there was the lightning alert. And I think all industries have gotten a lot of better with this, with fan safety and participant safety. Is not only the rain where they can't race on the track, but lightning, because if it's coming within a certain radius, shut down the on-track activity, because if the cars are still on the track, the fans aren't going to leave the seats. And it's really about making sure that there's a participant safety. You've got spotters up in the rooftops, and the fans are in the middle grandstands. You don't want to see anybody injured. So I think that's not only in racing, but I think other industries as well, where they're really taking that more serious as far as being more proactive when inclement weather is approaching. Fans don't quite understand it right away because they may not see the lightning, but we're pulling the car is being pulled from the
Jayson, thank you. I want to get you in on this because, I mean, literally the name of your company is Players Health, right? And you are getting into this industry. What's your perspective on some of the weather issues that we're discussing today when it comes particularly to keeping everyone safe and especially the athletes and the drivers?
Yeah, I mean, we see this all across the sports in particular, not just in motorsports, but we see it in baseball, we see it in soccer, that you have to have somebody watching what's actually going on in the weather. So I just recently coached my son in Chester Valley Little League, and I sit there and I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. And then all of a sudden it's just horrible, but there's no one actually checking like the weather. Like you have parents who are like, I think a storm's coming, but being proactive and actually saying, let's get out there. Let's say, like they did today when thankfully we were inside already before the rain and the thunder and the lightning passed over. But what we heard is the thunder warning, the lightning warning. So that was the first indication. Okay, we need to get out of here. And then the second indication is that all the screens went to like a public service announcement rather than what they normally were doing, which was broadcasting different events and different angles of the course. So perfect example, quick, active. There weren't, obviously it was just a practice, so there wasn't thousands upon thousands of individuals, but they were really quick, really responsive, and you saw people being like pulled or told to come back in.
We'll get off the weather here in a second. It's really interesting and it's very timely. So Jimmie, last word on weather is, Jayson described us all looking at our phones. I mean, when I looked at my phone this morning to check on the weather, it said it was clear all day, and then suddenly this weather came. You have to act nimbly, but what other resources do you avail yourself of? Are you just relying on like phone apps?
No.
Are you working with first responders? I mean, when there's a big weather event, you obviously have to make a decision as to whether to continue or not. And canceling an event the size of the Brickyard or the Indy 500 is no small endeavor. So you have to really be in tune with some of your other partners.
Right. So our security team, our heads of security, Mike Bakes, Brian Mahone, they're in constant communication with the National Weather Service. They're talking to them literally in the moment. They're following weather patterns in the Pagoda. There's a designated person that literally is looking at a screen, talking to the National Weather Service, talking to our local airport, which is another place to figure out, okay, what's going on with the weather and trying to figure out how far out is the lightning, how far out is thunder, because that's what triggers our systems. We also have an emergency action plan, which is an EAP for each specific event. It's going to have a certain number of fans. So that's 500, 400, SRO, IMSA all have EAPs that require each of us to know what our role is in an event of a number of potential incidents, but also weather. And we talk about it like yesterday, last night, 6 o'clock, email was sent out by our director of ops that literally spelled out, here's what happens if it rains in the morning of practice. Here's what happens if it rains after this. This is what's going to happen with all this, this activity, this action. It's going to get pushed. It's going to be moved, or it's going to be canceled. And so everyone is informed because it is the largest outdoor wedding in the world. And you just have to know that that's part of it. Part of having a race is the potential for rain. Everybody's going to crash in on umbrellas. Everybody's going to crash in for rain suits. Like, you got little kids out there. So what do little kids do when it's raining? They want to play in the puddles. They want to splash. And so, making our security staff aware that, hey, when it's raining, you need to make sure that we have a lot of seniors who are working in security. Be careful, because nobody's paying attention to where they're walking. They're just trying to get to their car as quickly as possible. So all of that communication that goes on, thankfully, we've done this enough times, knock on wood, that, people are astute to it, and it's not a shock that, okay, it's about to rain today.
Now, you mentioned EAP, Emergency Action Plan. That's a good way to move into that part of our discussion, which is, again, crucial as these events get larger in scale. The tabletopping of it, the preparation, the planning, that all becomes obviously way more important, takes up a significant part of your life, I know, in addition to everything else you're doing. Talk to us about how you prepare for something as big as the Brickyard. I mean, how many people will come through the Brickyard 400 this weekend?
Brickyard 400 probably have about 80,000 to 90,000. And Indy 500, you're at 425,000.
Something you got to start preparing for probably the day after the event ends from the year before. So talk to us about the prep and the tabletopping and sort of what goes into that.
The tabletopping is probably one of the most interesting and surprising things that I encountered when I started working this job 9 years ago. So during the month of May, right before the Indy 500, every emergency personnel you can imagine, from the FBI, the CIA, local sheriffs, fire department, health department, hospitals, every EMS, they all gather in our media center in one room. And we are provided certain scenarios. Some of them are doomsday scenarios, the worst of the worst that can happen. Some of them are scenarios like, what if a vending booth caught on fire? What if someone let off sarin gas? What if someone started to, just a shooter? Some of it is, what if somebody was protesting and they jumped out and they concreted all their arms together? So many of them are based on realities that have happened in other tracks. And these tabletop exercises essentially ask, what is everyone's role? What do you do? What is this agency going to do? What is this agency going to do? How long is that going to take? What is the impact on the race? What is the impact on trying to extract fans from the track? All of those things are thought about carefully within this scenario, and questions are asked to leadership and individuals who are on the leadership of all of these different agencies of, how do you want us to prepare? And it's extremely informative, if not scary, but it's extremely informative as to, man, these things really happen, but people are planning and trying their best to try to tabletop. How do you react?
I want to follow up on that, but George, I want to get you in. And while I'm talking to George, maybe you could think of an example of a tabletop exercise that you did and how it turned out in the real world, if there was a correlation there, what went right, what went wrong. We don't want to obviously disclose anything that we can't disclose, but in those parameters, think of that. George, what's your perspective on tabletopping, how it's grown in importance, and what your role is for these events when you participate?
Sure. I think back to that, communication's key. Mm-hmm. So planning for one of these events, we're having meetings well before the event to discuss the event, what activities are going to be at that event. So is there going to be pyro? Where is that pyro going to be launched from? Is it cold fireworks? Is it concussive fireworks? Where are those? What's the fallout zone? Are there any amusement rides there? Are they tied into the weather plan? Are the vendors getting the information of, hey, we're shutting down for the lightning as well? And again, if you shut down the track, but you don't tell the vendors there's lightning, where are they all going to congregate? They're going to congregate under those tents. do you want them under those tents? If you got severe winds coming, those tents aren't going to be suitable safety in the event of something like that. So you really got to be careful of those scenarios as well. So I think that's key. Communication is fundamental to the success of any of these events. And that's a holistic approach, because what we do involves everybody as well. It involves guest services, it involves legal, it involves the security teams, knowing the first responders, getting out to know the med crews that are going out to help the fans in need. That communication is essential. Their recognition of our team is essential. So it's not, hey, this person's just showing up and looking for information. What we're going to gather is who, what, when, and why. The reason we're here on event day is because there are no witnesses on Monday. This city, this event got built up this week, and it's got to start getting torn down as soon as the green flag flies on Sunday, and then it'll be gone Monday, Tuesday. So it's a completely different view of the facility after the event than when it actually is going on. So it's critical to be here.
Thank you, Jayson. As you're getting into this industry more, what's your thoughts on tabletopping and prep and communication obviously being incredibly important?
It's music to my ears. I mean, this is great. I think many underappreciate the operational risk of motorsports in particular, because it's not just the race that's happening. It's everything around it. We mentioned pyrotech, concerts, fans, vendors, different events that are happening outside of the actual race. And these are all really big issues in and of themselves, not even thinking about the race. And most of these actually happen during the race, after the race, before the race. So just a lot of complexity there. But the tabletopping is music to my ears.
Yeah, and relative to the drivers and the participants, what they want to hear is, you asked about a scenario where tabletopping really takes place and is really effective. It's our AMR IndyCar safety team. The way they have executed time and time again, being on the spot as soon as that car hits the wall, going in and saving lives, and going in and they're working and practicing that. How are we going to get the car turned over? How are we going to communicate with the driver that they're okay? How are we assessing what's the best way to handle this car to make sure we're, saving the drivers and not making things worse? The things that those guys are doing are amazing, just to practice the different scenarios of how might we have to extract a person, or as George and I talked about earlier, the doomsday scenario of a car going in the stands, which they have to practice and tabletop that. What happens if, the worst happens, the car goes through the fence or a part goes through the fence? How do you tabletop who to help first? And, making sure that, these people who are standing there with their phones and want to film everything, we understand this is still a dangerous area with a rocket ship sitting in the middle of it. How do you save those people? So those are some of the tabletop things that I've seen that have been the most effective, because we want our drivers to be safe. We want our fans to be safe. And sometimes you underestimate that you've got 33 cars going 200 and something miles an hour. And the only thing that really is between you and them is a fence. And the only thing between that driver and the wall is, fiberglass. If you don't have trained people developed there to help you, you're in a bad place.
Speaking of that, we were lucky enough, thanks to you, to be in the pit just a few minutes ago and be on the ground level with some of these cars and see the safety involved and see the technology involved, but really how close you are to danger. How has technology and training evolved to ensure that these rocket ships that you talked about are safe, and that they're not going into the crowd, they're not presenting a risk of excessive danger to the driver?
Well, I tell folks all the time, we can make our cars go faster, but can you make them stick to the ground? And we've had years where we've increased the speed, but that has led to, you can see it in practice, cars lifting up in the front and kind of flying just like an airplane and spinning, and you don't know where they're going to land. So we actually, I think, have designed the car to be slower, but able to stick. If you make the car go faster, the driver's going to go faster. And so we have to be cognizant of that and realize that if we can't control where the car goes once it hits something, then that's not a good result for anybody. I think the unfortunate and untimely death of Dale Earnhardt really transformed the industry in NASCAR with the Hans device. When you look at Formula One and IndyCar, they got rid of the open cockpit concept, And in Formula One, they added the halo. For us, we've added the aero screen. I can't tell you how many accidents you've seen where, the Lewis Hamilton Verstappen accident where one drove over the top of the other. The car is sitting on top of the driver's helmet and held, but it's being held up by the halo. The same thing in a number of accidents we've had where cars have flipped on the Indy 500 and skid and you see the sparks, but it's sliding on top of the aero screen. It's not sliding on top of the driver's head. That's been a tremendous change in the sport. And it's everything from how we build the cockpits. Scott Dixon had a horrific crash a couple of years back where the car flies in the air and it lands on the inside of the wall and the car just disintegrates and the only thing's left of the cockpit. And Scott got up and walked out of the car. And so you see accidents that, back in the 60s and 70s would have crushed the driver's legs, would have ended the driver's career. Drivers are having longer careers. The sport is better for it because of the technology and design that we have.
So if an injury does occur, let's talk about some workers' compensation issues for a moment. George, let's get you to jump in on this one as well. Are the drivers, are the pit crew personnel, other team personnel, are they considered employees? Depends on the state, perhaps.
I'm going to let Jayson on this workers' comp.
I was waiting for that one.
Yeah, that's a good handoff to Jayson. So.
Yeah, so I guess the biggest question is always like the hybrid employee versus contractor. And that's the biggest thing when it comes to work comp. Because you have individuals that, one, are employees. Great, they're covered under work comp. Super. However, you have contractors that may come in for a particular race because they have experience with that track. And that's where you kind of get into that gray line of employee versus a contractor. And then this creates a lot of jurisdictional ambiguity there, particularly across state lines. So that's where we're seeing like a lot of the work comp issues come out. When you don't, like a person comes in, their employee contractor or the contractor is actually out of, let's say, Pennsylvania. Or Delaware, but yet they're here today for an event. So if they're a contractor or an employee, where does that fall back on?
Yeah, I mean, those are interesting issues. I mean, as someone who defends a lot of sports-related workers' compensation claims, some other issues that come to the forefront are, issues that perhaps in other industries and other sports don't play as big a role. Jurisdictional issues, right? I mean, you've got people who are coming into a state for perhaps a weekend only. What state should govern the claim? You have traveling employee issues that are much more prevalent in this industry, given that they are by nature traveling from circuit to circuit. Return to work, right? I mean, something we struggle with in workers' comp. How do you get someone back to work when you've got very limited ability? And it's not like you could put someone back to a computer who is in a pit crew, right? It's a very active, very labor-intensive role. So those are challenges, I think, that face this industry that are different from most industries.
I say that because, I mean, you brought up a lot of good points. I mean, the tracking of the individual return to work is incredibly important. But also a thing to kind of hedge your bet a little bit is if you get A&H coverage on top of the work comp. So kind of pick us up that overlay for something that may be a gray area, or I need to hire you to figure out what we're going to do in this case.
It really becomes it comes into play when you have your NASCARs and your Indy cars, which are at the highest level, but then sometimes you have these other ancillary events, these kind of weekend warrior folks who have Ferraris or Porsches or some of those sports car events where they will literally say, we have no employees. And you're like, what do you mean you don't have any employees? You're about to bring 200, 300 cars to the race, and they're like, we don't have any employees. Everybody's either an independent contractor or a volunteer. Like, everybody's just doing it for the love of the sport. And so you got flaggers, you got people who are in race control, you got people up and down pit row some of whom are not receiving a check, aren't being paid. I just do this on the weekends for its fun. Some of the people in emergency services that they bring, who are you? I'm a weekend firefighter, but I just love being around cars and being around racing. And I told my friend Fred that I'd be willing to come out here and do this. And so if those people get hurt, are they employees? Are they subject to workers' comp? Or are they just participants who, or are they fans?
When they get hurt, they suddenly don't love you so much.
And
There's certainly not so philanthropic.
What kind of agreement was in place, right? Was it a track rental? Did
Right.
they rent the facility? What promoter was involved?
Right.
It gets in the same thing with concerts and things of that nature.
Let's get into
It gets
concerts.
very complex.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of those ancillary events. But George, we do want to get your perspective on claims, because as we were waiting a few minutes ago, we were talking a little bit about the types of claims that you see at these kind of events. Again, unique to this industry. What are some of the common things that you're seeing at some of the events when they do happen?
Sure. Well, just today we experienced the weather come in. Metal grandstands become very slippery with some of the footwear that's widely marketed now. It doesn't have very good traction control. So
No flying.
I wasn't mentioning any manufacturer name, but thank you very much. So yeah, so flip flops, Crocs, yes, and those really don't belong at a racetrack. But I get it. Fans are going to wear what's comfortable, so that's a challenge. Elevator safety, make sure your elevators are functioning properly. Escalators, if you have any of those, make sure those are functioning properly. So that's the coming in and leaving, making sure we have the fan access. ADA issues are also very important to the industry, is making sure that the facility is accessible to everybody. And that's key. I think as we were talking about the evolution of car safety, I think the industry as a whole, the fan experience has evolved considerably throughout the years. There's more for fans to do at the facilities, which brings more partners and participants to the game, more vendors. So I think that's that holistic environment. We need to make sure that vendor have proper insurance. So.
More fans equals more risk. I mean, we were, again, right up on the fence watching these cars go by. Jimmie, you are selling an experience. You're selling proximity more than ever. Fans are paying a premium to get down and close to these events. With that comes increased risk. I mean, back in the day, people weren't getting as close to the cars as they are today. We just weren't out in the pit. And again, we were inches from these cars. They weren't, they were coming in for service, but we were pretty close. And you got to be, that must make you crazy. The fans as close to the cars.
Well, sitting here listening to George as a claim guy, I wonder how he feels. We're both in the industry about drag racing, about NHRA. Because, as close as we allow people to go, if you've ever been to an NHRA event, you've seen the start of a drag race, it seems like people are standing in the flames. Like when they launch, first of all, the ethanol, the smell of the gasoline burns your eyes, burns your skin. You can feel it. But there's always a group with a crew and everybody else and sponsors and everybody else who are literally standing right behind the car when it launches. And it's like they're engulfed in flames and then they disappear. Every one of those cars is broke down. The engine is broke. If you go to their event, you can literally go stand next to the engine that's being taken apart and put back together really quick and put back on. It's one of the greatest things ever to see. But that fan proximity is what people want. And there's a cost to that, right? So we have to make sure our releases are approved by our insurance company. We have to be very firm about, even with our sponsors, probably one of the most complex things I deal with. Renting suite, when you get a suite, you expect to be able to go out in the pits, to be able to do what you do. Like we had you guys use Speed Waiver to sign releases. Our release language has to be very thorough. Release language has to be different for different states and different places, because in one state they may say you need to specifically release yourself from your own negligence. And so making sure you're up to date to that and getting advice from that, and then making sure the insurance company sees the ticket back language, the release language, the waiver language, making sure your security personnel are just not letting people go in. And in some situations, we've had to say to drivers, your kids can't participate in this because we can't get our insurance company to agree to a release for minors. That's the only protection we have to continue to make the sport accessible, but at the same time, be able to obtain insurance to be able to allow these activities to take place.
Yeah, I spend we'll get George in on this. I spend many hours a week dealing with waivers and trying to enforce them in some states, to your point, despite the fact that you have a really clean waiver. Courts bend over backwards, it seems, to allow plaintiffs to circumvent them. So that's an issue for sure that we all deal with. George, what's your take on that?
Well, I'll go back to some of the claim issues real quick, because we kind of glossed over just the weather ones. But I think the other key component, like we saw today in the fan zone, where keeping moving objects away from people.
Yes.
And that's always the key one, with the amount of golf carts here that are on property and navigating, whether it's teams, whether it's EMS, whether it's a vendor having a golf cart out there, shuttling people through the crowd, we need to make sure there's parameters in place for safe operation of those, making sure that there's procedures in place if there is an incident that happens. And, what is the procedure for that driver to do, record the information, et cetera, share it, get it over to Jimmie's team, et cetera. So that is a critical piece. The other operational aspects of what we see is again making sure the facility is in great shape. I commented to Jimmie, it's looking good out there. The fan zone was clean. It was free of debris. There's no parking bollards that aren't marked and things that people could or holes that people are going to fall in. So that's regular inspection, and that's where that holistic crew comes in. Because if Jimmie sees something today, he's going to be on the phone with his operation team. We got a pothole out here in the lot. Let's fix it before. It's cheaper to fix it now than have something develop later.
We talked earlier about some emerging risk issues that we didn't have to think about, even 10 or 5 years ago on some occasions. Active shooters, that's on the rise. You got to be, concerned about that.
Drones,
terrorist threats, protests. Talk to us about how your job has evolved to include assessing and avoiding risk involved with these emerging issues.
First of all, you have to find out if you got coverage. If you can even, if there's coverage available for what we are trying to do. And so this is an old school risk that we encountered is air balloons. Air balloons were our first race here was an air balloon race. We tried to replicate that. And at one point in time, we were not able to, the air balloon operators were not able to find the minimum amount of coverage that we required to have that event. And we had to cancel the event. There are times, and one of the things that shocked me coming into, there are times where industry will say pretty much, we cannot insure that activity. That is shocking. We've raced airplanes here. The Red Bull Air Race, where we raced planes around, different facilities, and we were able to get that approved. But then later on, there were airplane accidents during these airplane races, and my understanding is there was a difficulty in finding air coverage to do not just those races, but to do air shows. It started becoming difficult to find air show insurance. So some of these great fun things that are presented to us from an activity standpoint sound good, but all it takes is a few accidents for the insurance industry to say, hold up, wait a minute. We can't take this risk. Some of our video production things have increased in terms of access with the angles that fans want. And so you've got photographers who are right in the line of it, videographers who are right in the line of it, trying to get a perfect angle. You could do a lot with robotics. You could do a lot with machinery, but there's still that old school intuition that people want to have. And you have some aspirational photographers and videographers that will put themselves in some pretty interesting places just to get the shot. And that's something you have to think about a lot. Minor driving. There's long been a criticism in the United States that we don't let kids participate in driving early enough for them to be successful. And that's why some of your better drivers come from Europe, because they'll let a 5-year-old get in a 100 and something miles an hour car or ride a motorcycle at 80, 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour. And we don't let people do that in the United States. It's very difficult when we have to tell parents, hey, your kid can't come out here and race unless we have some form of signature from both parents, court order releasing the minor, all of those things, approval sometimes from the insurance company, that we're going to let a 13 or 14-year-old go out and compete in a Formula E or a Formula car to be able to race at those speeds. Those are challenges that, are interesting to our sport. Nobody cares if a 13-year-old goes out and bounces a basketball, but everybody cares if you let a 13-year-old go out and die in a race car.
No kiss cam here at IMS, right, Jimmie? Have we done away with the kiss cam?
No, we still got fan cams. I don't know if they're kiss cams, but we do a lot of fan cams.
You might want to make a call on that.
We do fan cams.
Before we get to George, Jayson, what's keeping you up at night in terms of recent developments, emerging technologies, things like that?
Well, a lot of these things that add more to the experience of the actual race, they're high risk, but also what comes with high risk and high exposure, it's high reward. At the
That's where the fun is.
Everybody's like, I love it. Let's do it. Kids, if you guys are listening, do not drive a car. Let's figure that out. But realistically, it's a lot of, everybody wants something new. Everybody wants to do something more exciting, more fun. Let's have a concert in the middle of a race. Cool. that's a whole nother event in and of itself. And then that just adds more complexity to the overall risk. Because Indy had a concert in the middle, right?
We have Snake Pit, and one of the interesting things about motorsports that makes it different than any other sport is alcohol. So we can put that out there. At our facility, we are able to bring your own food, your own drinks, your own beverage, and your own alcohol as long as it's not in glass. You can't do that at the Colts. You can't do that at the Pacers. So how does that impact the event? Well, and why do we do it? I mean, one, you got 425,000 people here. If we did not allow people to bring their own food, we wouldn't be able to feed everybody. And so we can actually fit more people in here. It's just a matter of bathrooms. But that alcohol piece added with the concert, it's a great time. It's fun. But does that make it, more susceptible or not that something is going to go wrong? So we have to have, extra security in mind to think through being aware and conscious of potential risks and what you're allowing when you have moving items. And that's why we work so hard to make sure things are clean and make sure we have some level of control. And when you're going to stop alcohol service from our bars, because people might have their own alcohol with them.
Might. George.
A couple things that again, talking about evolution of racing and where we've been and where we're coming and the dangers of it. I think one thing that we haven't touched on that part of that evolution is the e-racing, the electronic vehicles. That brings a whole different tabletop exercise when you're dealing with one of those batteries. How do you then deal with that? How do you do multiple cars? How do you submerge it, et cetera? So that's a whole nother tabletop exercise that goes into play.
And we've had 2 autonomous races. No driver in the car. We've had 2 autonomous competitions where universities and colleges have come here and actually had race cars on a Dallara chassis that they've competed and raced on the oval with no driver. Just like large remote control cars, but at a very, very high speed.
Wow. Let's talk more about fan experiences and some of the risks involved there, because we talked about alcohol, for example. That certainly presents a additional layer of risk, but other emerging issues with fans are, the rise in gambling. Certainly that's an issue that has evolved. And again, to the, as a tribute to the great work that the racing industry has done, a lot younger fans are coming to the track these days. Talk to us a little bit more about how that plays into what you're doing every day.
I thought that there was initially when gambling was starting to be legalized, I thought there would be more issues. Surprisingly, it feels like there has not. I feel like the industry has a really good lock on, from a technology standpoint, who should and should not be gambling and what the, knowing the odds and knowing whether players are engaged in gambling. They do a really good job of tracking that. And I think a lot of the players understand and believe it's not worth it. It's not worth it. They've done so much to get to this place in their lives. They're not willing to throw it all away for a couple of dollar bets. And it's so unpredictable. Racing is really unpredictable unless you're in drag racing where it's kind of 1-to-1 odds. It's really unpredictable, particularly in IndyCar, to know who's going to win. And so haven't seen that. I have seen in the social media, you talk about young people, there is some risk. Like E&O insurance is really big, and trying to figure out the social media rules, who's enforcing them. When you have to say, hey, I'm getting paid to promote this product, I'm getting paid to promote this sport, those warnings that you're supposed to have around social media stuff. I'm waiting. There has been some incidents where there's been some claims, and we're still like, there's so much of it. Trying to monitor all of that and trying to make sure it's being done right, and you got the right contracts in place, and who's going to ensure that, whether it's the personality, us. That's kind of an interesting space from more than probably gambling. I see a lot more concern from that. And of course, as George mentioned, I see a ton of concern about ADA. ADA is the Americans with Disability Act is a constant concern today, because so many folks, I can't ask you if you're disabled. Legally, I can't say, George, why do you need this placard? All George can say is, I need a placard. I need an ADA spot. I need an ADA seat. And I am supposed to accommodate that. Well, we have an aging population where there are a lot of people who they're not in a wheelchair, but my legs hurt, my feet hurt, my arms hurt, my shoulders hurt. I can't walk 2.5 miles to my seat. I need to be accommodated. And trying to respond to that so you don't get a claim is probably the thing that runs a lot of our tracks, because we're so big it's what really concerns a lot of us.
It's funny. George and I actually had a conversation prior to coming in here today about ADA, and he actually brought up a claim that had happened. A person on a scooter tipped over, ended up getting injured. But it's almost like you have to accommodate, as you said, but at the same time, when does it become too much accommodation? Because now we're also talking about the aging population. So we were saying in Daytona, there's a lot of older people. It's like on their bucket list. They want to go down there. They want to do this. But that's just like an inherent danger now. Now that you have more and more of that aging population.
I'm sure Indianapolis 500 is the same way with hey, that's a big Indy race, and they've seen it on TV for years, and they want to accomplish that, and they're getting older.
Or they've gone for 45 races and they're not going to miss 46.
Right. And here they are. They've just got out of the hospital 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely.
Where they discharged to go.
And that's always having a good safety crew and EMS crews here in the stands is fantastic. Some of the work that these crews do there is amazing. We hope fans come safely and leave with a great memory. But I think some of the EMS crews, that what they can do and help in those difficult situations, amazing.
And this goes back to your tabletop. I mean, we want those fans here. We want you to be a lifetime fan that's coming with your kids, your grandkids. But it starts in the ticketing office, right? It starts with understanding and listening to, okay, what are your abilities? Are you able to walk on concrete? Are you able to walk on grass? What's the closest place that we can park you to avoid you having a difficult time traversing from one side to another? Do you understand? Do you have a plan? If not, is there a member of our team that can help you develop a plan to get you from your car, to get you safely to your seat and back? And even looking at the training of our staff, are you trained to deal with the scooter that's coming up a ramp? Are you trained to help somebody who might want help or need help? Even a woman, or a man who is struggling to get up and down from their seat. Is there somebody trained to help with that or not? That's a full team effort that goes beyond the insurance guy and the legal guy talking on the phone. You got to have staff that understand and are trained to do that.
That's the holistic view, right? It's guest services are tied in with ticketing, because hey, these people got to their seat and we need to find another location for them, so let's get them another location. Let's make sure those points of contact know each other and solve problems, right? Everybody's a problem solver, and I think if we all have that mindset, and I think that's the evolution that we're also seeing, everybody's connected, more communicating. Everybody's got their cell phone with them, so it's a lot easier to communicate and make some of these accommodations that day. It's really, really part of the evolution. Guest experience is phenomenal. So,
And also, I think it's also the individuals that come here, because you have a lot of people come here for one event, and you have a lot of people on social media, and it becomes a community in a sense, because obviously there's a lot of racers out there. You might have one that you're supporting, but we were talking about the difference between racing and motorsports and a football game. We won't go into the alcohol difference between the two, but just strictly from, it's very hard. It's very easy to say that person supports another team when there's only two teams playing. So arguments, fights very easily could happen in that. But when there's 40 plus drivers, I mean, it's very hard to say, like, I'm this fan and I'm going to get a fight with somebody. Not to mention, you can't hear anything. You can't, if somebody says something about you, you can't hear it anyway. But I think also the community of NASCAR and motorsports is very supportive of each other. If they see something, they usually do say something.
It's no coincidence that the guy from Philly is talking about fans fighting at sporting events. You mentioned social media. It's a great segue into something I want to talk about, which is reputational risk. Also, something that I think over the last decade or so, we in the risk industry have become more cognizant of. In racing, it's incredibly important. I mean, I was just reading literally a couple of days ago at the Fire Festival, right? An infamous gathering. You could, I think, buy it now on eBay, the whole festival, for a certain amount. Astro World, there's a documentary right now. I think it's the most popular thing on Netflix about Astro World and what a disaster that was. It only takes one of those to turn your event from, this highly respected brand to one that you can't talk about without thinking disaster. That's especially important in racing, Jimmie, where there's so much corporate involvement. There's so much corporate sponsorship. Literally, NASCAR almost invented the idea of corporate sponsorship. Now you see NFL teams, NBA team with patches, one or two. NASCAR's been doing that forever. Famous for having their cars their drivers have lots of corporate sponsorship. How are you thinking and managing these events to avoid issues with brand reputation and ensure that corporate sponsorships are being protected?
Many of your contracts now have morality clauses in them that specify that if certain acts or actions take place, the sponsor can declare you in breach and they can step back from the sponsorship. And nobody's going to fight that, if it happens. And so thankfully, knock on wood, our sport is constituted by a lot of drivers. Again, the pathway to become a driver in motorsports, I'm not saying it's harder than being a football player or it's harder than being a basketball player, but many of our drivers drive for free for most of their career. They have to bring money to the car. They are the ones who, in many cases, secure the sponsor. When they're not in the car driving, they are driving around the country having lunches and dinners and breakfasts with different corporate partners, trying to get them to support their ability to stay in the car. And I think it changes their mindset about the value of having that opportunity and the value of being there. It's not to say that, the other folks don't appreciate it, but literally many of our drivers are business people. And so they understand that piece of, hey, my brand is everything. And if I lose my brand, I don't care how good I drive, I will not get a chance to ride in the Indy 500 next year. So I have to be very cautious about who I'm around. The other side of that, though, as you pointed out earlier, you could have gone out there today and Kyle Larson might have walked by you. Bubba Wallace might walk by you. Like, the accessibility to drivers is incredible when you're at the racetrack because you're like, man, did Catherine Legg just walk by me? Is that Joseph Dugard standing next to me on the fence? Like, that accessibility piece is amazing, given that you go to a football game or, it's helmet. I saw him on TV. The only way I can get to know him is on TV. Here, you stand outside the media center and there's people you'll literally see standing there getting their stuff signed and folks talk to
earlier, you didn't see this, but George signed a bunch of autographs. Not because people mistook him for a driver, but because there's a whole segment of insurance. Follow George around.
I got to get George's autograph.
The insurance group. George, what's your take on this issue?
Well, I think when we talk about reputation and brand protection, right, I think it's even a bigger jump when we start talking about the other activities at the venue. So you said you have 270 days of activities here. You may bring in concerts, you may bring in other things. And certainly if something goes south at one of those events, the tagline is going to read Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And then it was the whatever concert was going on. So you're going to be tied to that event, unfortunately. So that's where the partnership with the proper promoter, bringing those folks in, is essential. Knowing what they're going to expect when that event happens, what their tabletop exercises are, what relationship you have during the event, who's responsible for what. Is it just a pure here, you're taking over the property, or are we supplying our security, are we supplying our EMS, et cetera. So I think those are critical aspects of these things that can really, you need to protect the brand. And that's one thing that you really need to be cognizant of, who you're partnering with and making sure it all goes right, because a bad partnership can really damage the brand in the social media world.
So these brands are big targets, cybersecurity issues, data breaches, emerging technologies with regards to bringing fans into the Speedway. How are you doing that? Talk a little bit about that if you can.
Well, certainly how we do outreach, how we market the event. We do a lot on social media and other channels. That's the way, that's a primary form of marketing. But even in that space, we've seen claims, ADA claims in how your website is configured. We've seen claims for pixels and whether those pixels. So there's this whole new world of claims in the social media marketing space, and how you do outreach using different technology, and whether in certain states, it violates some rule, and all of that's emerging. And we're finding it out on the go, and then also finding out whether that's a coverable claim. There's no insurance for, you have some breach, data breaches, how you maintain data. Many times sponsors are coming to your track because they want to get that fan info. They want to get that fan data. Who's going to hold that data? how does that work in Europe versus how does that work in the United States versus how does that work in California? Sometimes I've seen even the relationships be such that has been so complicated that sponsors have said, you know what, we're not even going to collect data at the event because it's just too complicated to figure out. It's too much risk in terms of the claim that might come from collecting someone's data, there being a data breach, or how you use that data or how you maintain it, or some of the states or countries' requirements for the disposal of that data. They just said, we're not going to play in that sandbox.
George, any thoughts on that? Jayson?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the cyber liability is really important there because I mean we all have cashless systems now. We have wearables that we could use now, and all of that is trackable. So it's going to be a rise in the cyber liability. So you're not just using cyber liability at like your targets and companies of that nature. Now, like racetracks are buying cyber insurance because they have to, because they are collecting. If you go to any of these things, if you don't have your card, you could pay with your phone. Some concert venues are actually going away from that, and they said you need to have your card. Like, we don't want to do any paperless. It's either cash or you give a card. We're not doing any of this because we don't want to store the data. We don't want to be responsible. We don't want to have a crazy cyber policy in order to protect us from something that didn't exist 15, 20 years ago.
Another thing, I think, Jimmie, that I think is interesting and relatively unique in this field are issues like, carbon footprint, waste generation, noise, pollution issues. We were all out there, very, very loud. I think some of the other, veteran, like one of our guests here, would tell you that the sound of the Brickyard is different from the sound of the Indy 500. The cars are different. I couldn't tell. It was all loud to me, though. But what are some of those kind of issues that you're dealing with?
Yeah, we have an environmental plan here. We have an environmental committee. It's one of my internal clients where we're constantly trying to figure out ways to reduce waste in terms of both our on-track footprint, but also our fans. And so we're constantly measuring those methods, and we work with some of our partners like Shell and others to try to figure that out, try to be more environmentally responsible. Some people say, well, it's racing, how can you do that? But as we've gone to a hybrid motor. We work with some recycling partners, but the noise is what people love sometimes. And we have ways of earplugs and other things of dealing with that.
I
But
think from a legal perspective, what you're getting at is something that, can't be lost, which I think we all agree on, is you're going to a race.
assumption of the risk.
Exactly, right? I mean, when you leave here and you file a claim because it was too noisy, you know what my very arcane and legalistic defense is? You were at a race,
Assumption.
right? I mean, at some point you have to assume that what you're doing is risky, somewhat dangerous, and to Jimmie's point, you're assuming the risks. So our listeners, viewers shouldn't forget, which they don't, the idea of assumption of risk. That's a defense, not just in this sport, but in many sports and entertainment venues. You have to be safe. You have to do everything safely. At some point, though, you can't be a guarantor of your fans' safety. That's part of the process.
This was a rumor. I don't know if George knows the truth, but when NASCAR racing in Chicago, didn't they have to alter? I had heard they had to alter the exhaust because the Chicago Museum of Art was concerned that if they kept them at the normal level, there might be damage to the art at the Chicago Museum of Art or something like that.
Yeah, Mona Lisa would go from
I do not know anything about that.
smile to a frown.
But
Yeah.
on environmental concerns, I think as it gets warmer, hotter,
Yes.
global warming and things like that, I think we need to, like when we're having concerts in the middle of the summer, hydration stations, think about having, yes, venues sell water, but is there a way to also promote
Free water.
shade and free water and hydration stations where they can fill up maybe at different care centers and things of that nature to provide that relief as well. And
Yeah, I was at the Chicago race, and they were giving out water to the fans, something I haven't seen too much without spending, $15. They were handing out water to fans. So that's a pretty good investment, I would think, towards safety.
Yeah, from an insurance standpoint, I love it.
Yeah.
But again, it just adds to the rising costs of operational, maintaining a facility like this.
Right.
Like
right.
now something that we were charging for, now we have to give away for free. But realistically, it's something that's needed, especially as heat indexes rise across the country.
And out here we get corn sweat, so I mean, corn sweat's real in Indiana, so it increased the level of humidity. But yeah, you definitely need to keep people hydrated.
All right, well, this time has flown by. This has been incredible insight. I want to thank you all. I want to end off maybe with one recommendation, one thought, something you can leave our viewers and listeners with that they could take away from our podcast that you, given your experience, would tell them that they should apply to their practice, be it in sports, entertainment, or something else? Jimmie, we'll start with you.
I would say your risk manager, your insurance provider, your carrier, your claims manager, they're your friend. Because if something happens, that's who you're going to call. So they're not at the end of the process. They're at the beginning of the process. They're part of putting the event together and talking to them, working with them, inviting them out to the event, getting feedback from them after the event, letting them look at your documents, letting them look at your releases, getting their kind of stamp of approval on those things, letting them kind of let you know what the industry standard is. That's what you need to do to make sure that you kind of dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's on an event to the best of your ability. We can only see so much. You live in a bubble when you're at your event, at your place. A lot of times these claim managers and risk managers and your insurance people, they're seeing a lot broader bubble. And so, that's what's really been helpful to help teach me and train me and teach our team is not just having them talk to the legal department. We have them talk to everybody and educate everybody. And it gets, it's kind of like if your parents just talk to you, you're like, But if you bring some other folks in to talk, then you're like, oh, okay, that sounds like it makes sense.
Hug a risk person. Jayson, DeMarco, Players Health. Give us one takeaway.
Jimmie, I love that, by the way. That's everything on here. Get insurance involved, get the attorneys involved early, because honestly, the only way that we could actually help save you is if we know all the risk mitigation that you're doing. And if we could put that out there, it just makes our job a lot easier. And I guess it makes your job a lot easier as well.
Yeah, and to that point, I think my key takeaway is continue to evolve. I mean, stagnation is not going to be a good spot to live in this world right now. So continue to evolve, continue the processes to enhance safety all around. I think we're seeing that with the venues and keeping everybody, the participant, the fan, make it a memorable experience. They've come to the event, they leave the event in a great experience. That's the only thing they're taking away is that great experience. And I think that's fantastic.
Great insight. George Burgee, Davies, North America. Jayson DeMarco, also SERMA Advisory Board member from Players Health, and especially our friend and longtime member, Jimmie McMillian from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, who is such a gracious host, got us access down below. His whole team is incredible. We really thank him. Thank our team behind the scenes, including Lisa, to put this on. Remember, if you like this content, which we know you do, how could you not? Please tell your friends, join SERMA at theserma.org. We are constantly putting out great content like this, live events. We will be following this event right now, this podcast, with a happy hour in Indianapolis. We have a lot of other events coming up. Stay tuned. Check out our social media, and we'll see you on the next SERMAPod.